Yes, good evening and Assalamu alaikum. I would sincerely like to welcome everybody and wanted to thank SOCPA to give us this opportunity to have this important topic, which is going to be a very important topic for the next 3 years, which is about converging of the SOCPA standards to IFRS. My name is Anis Motorwala, and I represent ACCA, which is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants based out of UK. We are basically a global accounting not-for-profit body, and we have been into existence for the last 100 years. We have an MOU with the SOCPA to basically support and develop the accounting profession in the region. So just to give you a quick introduction about what ACCA and what the network reach is, we are truly a global body, and we have something like 83 offices with our members operating in 173 countries. It's a membership body, and the number which stands as of today is something like 154,000 ACCA members. What makes us interesting is this number of the students, because ACCA has opened up doors to many emerging markets, and today we have something like 432,000 students studying ACCA programs. We work, as you know, it's a professional qualification, so it has to be recognized by the employers. So we work with a lot of employers, and something like 8,500 employers are approved employers for ACCA. Now you may have a question, what's the landscape for Saudi Arabia looks like? So we have something like 300 members who are working in ACCA here, and around 1,500 students who are pursuing the ACCA program in the kingdom. So in terms of its global acceptance about how ACCA is recognized, we tried mapping ACCA to the top 2,000 companies, and what we found out that among the top 25 global brands, we have something like 1,000 ACCA members and students who are employed. Brands like these Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, Nestle, or even Google, Apple, McDonald's, these are the kind of organization where you find ACCA members and students. We have something called global employers. These are our top 8 global employers. When I say global, these employers, anywhere in the world where you walk in, they would recognize ACCA not only as a qualification, but if you are pursuing further programs in ACCA, these employers would support them either by funding it or even by giving extra time to study. How does it look like in Saudi Arabia? So these are some companies where you find ACCA members working as of today. And what's interesting to watch here is that it's not only restricted to the practice, but it goes to extraction, to the banking sector, and not only international brands, but even homegrown local brands like Al-Marai, Samba, you have the STC, Abdul Latif Jamil, all of them. So the gamut of ACCA qualifications acceptance is wide across the sector. It's not sector specific, it's a holistic qualification recognized across sectors. I wanted to share this, we did a research with 700 finance professionals globally, and we had asked them, what are the 10 competencies you basically look for when you hire finance professionals? So these are the 10 competencies which were highlighted by these 700 finance professionals globally. And if you look at it, at the heart of it is professionalism and ethics. This is what has come as the top-notch requirement among the 10 competencies by what the global financial professionals are looking for in new finance recruits. That is the reason, why we emphasize on, dilemmas, and I'm sure you all will recognize dealing with ethical dilemmas is what the challenge is. Whether you follow ethics of justice or ethics of care or we balance, that is going to be a constant struggle with people, and that's why. So talking about ethical dilemmas, what we ensure as a body, we make sure that the members' integrity is supported well, and we do a lot of we have support them by articles, by online programs, case studies. There's plenty of material available for our ACCA members, especially emphasizing on integrity and good conduct and ethics. In terms of development for professional development, we have something like 272 online resources available to our members. We are in talks with SOCPA to try and see, some of these resources can be shared as part of our MOU with them, which can be used for the development of the SOCPA members. There's a lot of emphasis on research and insights, and what we do is we make sure that the issues which matter today are always taken care of. So we do it through our global forums. We have something called Accountants for Business program, and under which we run a lot of important business themes. And Accounting Futures is a program where we have a view of what's happening in the future. So for example, these are the 10 global forums which we run. And why I bring this up is that this is open for participation. So if you feel that you can contribute to any of these topics, these are virtual forums. This is a group of expert panels from the industry, from practice, from academia around the world, and they discuss these topics and they feed into ACCA what's happening. So this is an open invitation to all of you. If you feel that you can add value, you don't necessarily have to be an ACCA member. You just need to be a subject matter expert on any of these topics, and you can contribute. We've just recently added one more forum, which is actually called the Forum for Ethics. So please feel free to talk to me outside, and we can make sure that if you need any participation, we would be glad to have a representation from Saudi Arabia on any of these global forums. I was mentioning about research and insight. What we do is, these are some topics which we have identified as of today are key. So for example, risk and reward, financial transformation today, how things are changing with shared service operations, audit and society. Under corporate reporting, we have things like narrative reporting and integrated reporting, which is now a new, going to be the future. And access to finance, under which we also make sure that the SME sector is covered well. And environmental accountability is a topic which ACCA has innovated. It talks about sustainability and how future we are going to account for the carbon produced in the world. We also have an initiative, a strategic alliance with the IMA, which is the management accountant body from the US, where we're trying to work together in sync and make sure that the profession gets benefited. So there's a website called theroleofcfo.com. You can make a note of it. And that's where you see all the cutting edge research, which is joint research done between ACCA and IMA. And this is mainly focusing to the corporate sector, the role of the CFO, how it is changing, and what are the value adds both the bodies can provide. Before I move on to the topic, let me just quickly touch upon on the topic itself on IFRS. It's a global standard. ACCA, in the main qualification, IFRS has been since 1996. And alongside the main qualification, we also have standalone, like for example, we have IFRS diploma, we have got the IFRS certificate, and recently we've introduced a program just targeting the SME. So there is a lot of focus on IFRS from support available from ACCA. These are some ACCA surveys we did on with the CFOs, and there were some take-ups we found on IFRS. 100+ companies, they permit or require IFRS. There was a G20 resolution passed after the crisis that IFRS compliance has to be taken seriously. And because Saudi Arabia is part of G20, what we are going to discuss today is going to be of international relevance, and hopefully this will hit the international press on Monday. So out of the G20 countries, 15 countries already require IFRS or are in process. So Saudi is part of it. 3 substantial national convergence projects are going on, which is obviously India, Indonesia, and China. And Japan, mostly not, but they've allowed domestic companies which have international ambitions to go for IFRS. So what are the key arguments we have for the global standards? First of all, what we've noticed that there are very many financial benefits for global businesses by going for IFRS. We all know that different standards produce different financial numbers, so it's time that everything has to be standardized. And there is a risk premium involved, the cost of capital goes high if the standards are not in place. So just to you can have these reports. What we have interviewed 163 investors and CFOs. Some of these findings are available on our website. I'm not going to go through this, but what we see, and there are some key findings, that the benefits outweigh the cost. This is what a large part of audience are saying. There is certainly an ease in the cost of capital if you move into IFRS. And today's global environment where businesses are having cross-border activities, this really facilitates cross-border activities. And post-crisis, obviously, the support for IFRS has really grown big time. And countries which use IFRS, they're mostly positive about it. So what are the benefits the CFOs have recognized with IFRS? First of all, they find that there's a lot of credibility of financial statements. Second, it's easier to operate globally with IFRS standards. There is certainly a consistency in the markets and its regulation, and they find that there is an easier access to finance. Certainly the compliance cost goes down quite drastically, and there is an internal cost saving. So these are some highlights what CFOs have told us globally. We can certainly skip this part, but education and training of accountants becomes key because if there's one standard, it's easier to train and educate people. And because of this increased mobility across companies and countries, if there's one standard to follow across, it makes much life easier for everyone. There was this dedicated survey we did in Europe where we found out that the cost of capital comes down, not big, but there's a substantial amount of cost of capital comes down when IFRS was implemented across Europe. So there are lot of case studies. Please do feel free to visit our website and you can download these reports. There are reports where IFRS in the US, what is the investor's perspective? IFRS in China, what are the lessons learned, etc. So, do investors think it's worthwhile? Yes, from an ACCA point of view, there are many problems to be overcome, but there are significant benefits what we have noticed. And finally, the studies of stock prices in capital markets show that this is a reality and it is worth it. I'm sure you're going to really get to know more after we have our speakers speak, our panel discuss. You'll have a much better understanding, and I'm sure we'll get to hear your views also into that discussion. So that was a quick introduction from my side. I believe it's time for me to invite our next speaker, who is going to basically brief you about this whole SOCPA convergence project. So I would like to invite Dr. Ahmed Megamis on the stage. And I don't think he needs any introduction, but I would still want to introduce him and try to sum up his profile, which was actually of 3 pages, but I have managed to get into a few lines. He's completed his doctorate in business administration with majors in accounting and minor in finance from Mississippi State University in '97. He's also a fellow of SOCPA, and as a distinguished accounting and finance professional in the region, he's represented various boards and committees. And some of the boards he represents are the Board of Trustees of the AOFI, the member of the Professional Accountants Organization Development Committee of IFAC, and member of the National Board of Academic Assessment and Authentication, Ministry of Higher Education. He's chairman of the board of Saudi Accounting Association, member of Higher Studies Committee, King Saud University, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any time, over to Dr. Megamis.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. بداية أحيي الأخوة الحضور كما أشكر ممثلي جمعية المحاسبين المعتمدين في بريطانيا على هذا التجمع الطيب. سأتكلم اليوم باللغة العربية أمامكم، خاصة ونحن في صرح من صروح العلم في جامعة الامير سلطان للتعرف على مشروع التحول للمعايير الدولية في المحاسبة والمراجعة. بالنسبة سأتكلم اليوم عن حوالي 9 نقاط: مقدمة وأسباب التوجه والإجراءات التي تمت للوصول للقرار حول التحول، والإجراءات التنفيذية للتحول والمنشآت التي تطبق عليها تلك المعايير، ومراحل التحول ومتابعة الإصدارات الجديدة للمعايير، وإدخال التعديلات اللازمة، المحاسبة على المعاملات المتوافقة مع الشريعة والمراجعة شرعيا، والدور المستقبلي للهيئة. بداية، أناط نظام المحاسبين القانوني الصادر في عام 1992 بالهيئة من ضمن مهام أخرى إعداد تطوير مراجعة وإعداد وتطوير معايير المحاسبة والمراجعة، وأصدرت الهيئة قريبا من 22 معيار محاسبيا و15 معيار في المراجعة، بالإضافة إلى الآراء المهنية والتفسيرات في المحاسبة والمراجعة. كما اتبعت الهيئة منهجية محكمة في عملية إصدار تلك المعايير، كان من أهم مكوناتها الاسترشاد بالمعايير العالمية المتاحة مثل المعايير الأمريكية والبريطانية والدولية، واستخدمت ما يسمى بالديو بروسيس للتأكد من أن هذه المعايير تطبق بطريقة صحيحة في المملكة وأيضا تصلح للبيئة في المملكة. أيضا في حالة عدم وجود معايير محاسبية سعودية، أقر مجلس الإدارة أن يكون هناك توجه للمعايير الدولية في المواضيع التي ليس لها معايير سعودية. هذا فقط مقدمة بسيطة عن المعايير. ما هي أسباب توجهنا إلى تطبيق المعايير أو التحول للمعايير الدولية؟ أولا، تسارع وتيرة الأعمال الدولية. كما تعلمون هناك الكثير من الشركات العالمية، وكثير أيضا من تداخل بين الشركات المحلية والدولية. على سبيل المثال شركة سابك لديها من الشركات المملوكة لها خارج المملكة والمساهمة لها أيضا في خارج المملكة، وكذلك مثل شركة الاتصالات السعودية، بالإضافة إلى قطاعات البنوك والتأمين أيضا كانت سباقة في تطبيق المعايير الدولية. أيضا كما تعلمون هناك انتشار وقبول للمعايير الدولية، كما ذكر زميلي أكثر من 100 دولة الآن إما تطبق المعايير أو تعترف بتطبيق المعايير في بلدانها. كذلك عند تطبيق الهيئة السعودية ومنتسبين الهيئة السعودية في تطبيق المعايير المحاسبية في مواضيع المحاسبة التي ليس لديها أو لا يوجد لدينا معيار سعودي فيها ويتم تطبيق المعيار الدولي، أوجد نوع من الصعوبات في التطبيق لعدم تجانسهما في ترتيب الفقرات أو الإحالات لبعض الفقرات في بعض المعايير، وكذلك بما يسمى بالإطار الفكري، اختلاف بين الإطار الفكري السعودي أو الإطار الفكري الدولي، فأوجد بعض الصعوبات في تطبيق بعض فقرات المعايير، وإن كانت في مجمل لا تختلف كثيرا. كذلك إنها أحد أهداف الخطة الاستراتيجية للهيئة التي أعدت في الفترة من 2009 حتى 2013. وأخيرا دعوة مجموعة العشرين، دول مجموعة العشرين والتي المملكة عضوا فيها، دعت إلى أن يكون هناك معايير دولية واحدة ذات جودة عالية. كيف توصلنا إلى مشروع أو قرار أن نتحول للمعايير الدولية؟ لم يؤخذ الاعتبار مثل ما هو معروف بالسويتش أون أند سويتش أوف، وإنما بدأنا بدراسات من قبل اللجان المعنية. بداية اللجان، لجنة المحاسبة والمراجعة، انتهت تلك اللجان بعد الدراسات بمناسبة التحول، ثم شكلت لجنة توجيهية بعد رفع الأمر إلى مجلس الإدارة أيضا لنفس الموضوع. وهذه اللجنة شكلت من عدة جهات، منها وزارة المالية، مؤسسة النقد العربي السعودي، وهيئة السوق المالية، وأيضا لجنتي معايير المحاسبة والمراجعة. انتهت هذه اللجنة، لجنة التوجيهية أو الستيرينج كوميتي، إلى مناسبة التحول للمعايير الدولية، وأن يكون بشكل مدروس يأخذ في الاعتبار العوامل المحلية، وأن يتم التحول بالتدرج. كذلك تم التواصل مع ذوي الاهتمام والاختصاص عن طريق الإعلانات والبريد الإلكتروني حول المشروع وحول ما انتهت إليه اللجنة التوجيهية، وطلب المشاركة من كل مختص بإبداء الرأي إيجابا أو سلبا حول مشروع التحول للمعايير الدولية. هذا كله تم قبل أن يصدر مجلس الإدارة قراره في تاريخ 26/2/1433 باعتماد آلية التحول. إذن قرار التحول للمعايير الدولية لم يأتي اعتباطا، وإنما أتى بعد دراسات وبعد أخذ آراء كثير من الجهات، وأيضا أتيحت الفرصة للكثير لإبداء الرأي إما بالإيجاب أو السلب على مشروع التحول، وانتهى هذا بقرار مجلس الإدارة. الإجراءات التنفيذية للتحول. يستدعي التحول أو تنفيذ خطة التحول هو أن نتبنى منهجية لدراسة المعايير والنظر في مراحل التطبيق ومدى الحاجة لإجراءات أي تعديلات لازمة عليها أو على الأنظمة والتعليمات الحالية ليتم تطبيق تلك المعايير بطريقة صحيحة. نقصد في هذا الأمر أن لما ندرس المعيار ونرى أن المعيار لابد أو يختلف أو يتعارض مع بعض الأنظمة، إما إذا كان هناك إمكانية في اختيار أوبشن أو اختيار شيء مسموح به في المعيار فنختار الأوبشن ليتوافق مع النظام. أما إذا كان النظام يتعارض ولا يوجد من سبيل إلا تطبيق المعيار، وعدم تطبيق المعيار سينحرف بنا إلى ما يسمى عدم تطبيق المعايير الدولية، سنسعى جاهدين لتعديل النظام ليتوافق مع المعايير أو متطلبات المعايير الدولية. كما أسلفت يا أخوان، الهدف ليس فقط سويتش اون اند سويتش اوف لتطبيق المعايير الدولية، وإنما لابد من دراسات للتأكد أن المعايير تطبق بطريقة صحيحة في المملكة. يسبق ذلك كله التعرف على أي اختلافات ما بين الأنظمة وبين الظروف المحيطة بالمجتمع. أيضا القضية ليست تؤخذ المعايير ككل، وإنما يؤخذ الإجراءات التنفيذية على كل معيار من معايير المحاسبة والمراجعة. كذلك تقوم بها اللجان الفنية المختصة وليست الأمانة العامة، وتشرف عليها لجنة معايير المحاسبة أو لجنة معايير المراجعة حسب الموضوع. اللجنة التنفيذية لكل لجنة أيضا تقوم بما يسمى الدراسات الأولية والتعامل اليومي أو الشبه الأسبوعي لكل ما يقدمه المستشارين عند دراستهم للمعيار الدولي. وكما قد يعلم البعض، يعمل على المشروع أكثر من 25 مستشار، منهم من داخل المملكة ومن خارج المملكة، ومنهم من الإخوان من السعودية والإخوان من الدول الصديقة مثل باكستان، جنوب أفريقيا، سريلانكا، البحرين، وأيضا ممثلين اللي خلينا نقول من جنسيات مختلفة في المملكة من الأردن وأيضا من السودان ومن مصر. هذا كلهم يعملون في مشروع التحول للمعايير الدولية. لما يدرس المعيار ويدرس التفسيرات المرتبطة بالمعيار، نأتي إلى نتيجة إما بتعديل أو إضافة أو تحديد أحد الخيارات. ولله الحمد حتى الآن لم نجد أي حاجة لتعديل متطلب في المعايير، وإنما في بعض المعايير هناك حاجة لإفصاح إضافي أو تحديد خيار معين. إذا كان هناك خيارين قد ننظر في الخيار المناسب للبيئة. حتى الآن أنجزنا، أنا أذكر قريبا من الثلث من مشروع التحول في المعايير المحاسبة ومعايير المراجعة. أعني في ذلك المرحلتين، المرحلة الأولى والثانية، هي 5 مراحل. مجموع المعايير المحاسبة والتفسيرات قريبا من 70 معيار ورأي وتفسير، وكذلك معايير المراجعة أقل شوية. بالنسبة بعد ذلك، بعد ما تعرض هذه التعديلات من اللجنة من المستشارين إلى اللجنة التنفيذية، ترفع للجنة الرئيسة، ثم ترى اللجنة الرئيسة فيما جرى عليه من تعديل إضافة إفصاح أو اختيار أوبشن، تنظم ما يسمى بالطاولة المستديرة أو المائدة المستديرة، ويدعى لها نخبة المهتمين والمختصين ممن لم يشارك في دراسة المعيار سابقا أو من يشارك في اللجان الفنية التي درست المعيار، حتى يعطي استقلالية ويعطي رأي آخر. أخذنا على سبيل المثال الأخوان للمدينة المنورة لمدة يومين، من الساعة يعني حوالي 8 ساعات في اليوم فقط لمراجعة كل معيار، دراسة كل معيار، والنظر في ما يحتاج من تعديل أو ما يحتاج لإضافة. ولله الحمد كما أسلفت هناك فقط إضافات، إفصاح إضافي أو اختيار أوبشن. هؤلاء الأشخاص مكونين من معدي القوائم المالية من قطاعات عديدة، بنوك وغيره، مراجعين أكاديميين وممثلين عن الهيئات الإشرافية، سوق المال، مؤسسة النقد. بعد ذلك يتم رفع أي ملاحظات في تلك الجلسات إلى أيضا مرة ثانية إلى اللجان الفنية. فمعنى ذلك أن هناك أيضا دراسة لما نتج من ملاحظات. تقوم تلك اللجان الفنية أيضا أقصد اللجان الفنية اللجنة التنفيذية واللجنة الرئيسة للجنة معايير المحاسبة والمراجعة، تقوم بعد ذلك بالدراسة وتنشر توصيات تلك اللجان بخصوص كل معيار على الموقع الهيئة لإبداء ملاحظاتهم، والوقت يحدد حقيقة في الويب سايت أو في الموقع، لكنه مفتوح حتى عام 2016 31/12/2016. الأمر مفتوح بأي إجراءات أي ملاحظات على هذه المعايير، وليس فقط حدد بأسبوعين أو 3. البعض قد يقول اعتقد أن لا توجد فرصة لإبداء الرأي فيما يراه من وجوب تعديل أو تغيير. كذلك بعد ما تجينا الملاحظات من العموم سيتم مناقشتها في اللجان الفنية، ومن ثم في نهاية الأمر يرفع المشروع المعيار بالتعديلات المطلوبة إلى مجلس الإدارة لاعتماده. نقطة أساسية ومهمة جدا يا أخوان، البعض يرى أن نعيد كتابة المعيار الدولي، وحسب ما هو معمول لدى مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولي أن المعيار الدولي كي يتم الإشارة له بأنه وفقا للمعايير الدولية يجب ألا يكون هناك أي تعديل في المتطلبات من القياس، متطلبات إلغاء عرض، إلغاء إفصاح، تقليل إفصاح. لا بد أن تكون المعايير الدولية كما هي، ولكن يجيز المعيار أو الأنظمة الدولية أو مجلس معايير الدولية إضافة الإفصاحات أو تحديد خيار معين من الخيارات الموجودة في المعيار. كما أن رأت اللجان الفنية أن التعديلات يجب ألا تكون داخل نصوص المعيار، حيث أن نصوص المعيار مرتبطة مع نصوص أخرى، فبعض المعايير تشير إلى فقرات محددة، فأي تعديل في سياق أو في ترتيب هذه الفقرات سيؤثر على معايير أخرى تشار إليها. ومن من محاسن الصدف أيضا رئيس مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولي السابق السير ديفيد تويدي بعد أن ترك مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولي انتقل إلى مجلس المقيمين المعتمدين اللي يسوي المعايير، مجلس معايير التقييم الدولية. اطلعت على كتيب المعايير التقييم الدولية، هناك إشارات واضحة للمعايير المحاسبة الدولية بفقراتها، يعني يشير الفقرة. فمن هذا يعطينا أيضا تأكيد أن لا نتعرض ل تسلسل الفقرات، وأن يكون قرار الهيئة في تعديلات المعايير الإضافية أو تحديد الأوبشن عن طريق ما يسمى نقول بندكس، أو يكون ملحق في كل معيار يتضمن الفقرات المضافة أو المعدلة أو الإشارات الفقرات الملغاة إذا كان هناك أوبشنز، دون التعرض للمعيار الدولي كما هو. كذلك لابد من نشرح لماذا أضفنا الإفصاح، لماذا أخذنا بالأوبشن 1 بدل الأوبشن 2. كذلك أيضا مهم جدا يا أخوان في إعدادنا للمعيار ألا نتعرض للمعايير الدولية بنسختها الإنجليزية أو العربية، وإنما يكون هناك أنا أسميه دليل اعتماد معايير المحاسبة الدولية وتطبيقها في المملكة. هذا يكون كتيب مرفق بالمعايير، هذا يمكن التعديل عليه بسرعة. على سبيل المثال هناك بعض التعديلات على 7 معايير، فلو عدلنا يصدر مجلس معايير المحاسبة تعديل واحد وبعدين يذكر أن التعديل هذا سيتأثر به المعيار ألف وباء وجيم ودال، ونظرا صراحة لضعف الإمكانيات البشرية وأيضا عدم وجود المتخصصين قد يكون هنا سنواجه صعوبة في المستقبل في ملاحقة التعديلات وأيضا إعادة كتابة المعايير بالتعديلات التي تطرأ من مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية. كذلك أيضا المشروع نظر بحرص وبعناية على الترجمة الحالية للمعايير الدولية، وأيضا وجد هناك فيها إشكاليات، وتم رفع الإشكاليات إلى مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية، وطلبنا أن نقوم بترجمتنا الخاصة لنا للمملكة وليس لباقي دول العالم. ولله الحمد هناك أيضا تطورات في هذا الأمر سنطلعكم عليها لاحقا عندما يحين وقتها. أيضا للتأكد من أن تطبيق المعايير المحاسبة أو المراجعة الدولية في المملكة لابد، وحنا نؤكد لابد أن يكون هناك العمل على مشاريع مساندة في التعليم والتدريب والاختبارات والزيارات الميدانية وعقد الورشات وحضور الندوات للتكلم للآخرين اللي هم الذين يعدون القوائم المالية وليراجعوا القوائم المالية أن هناك معايير محاسبة دولية ستطبق في المملكة، فيجب الاستعداد من الآن لهذا الأمر. الاستعداد يتم عن طريق الحضور الدورات التدريبية، تهيئة الأفراد، تهيئة المنشآت، أيضا المشاركة في مناقشتنا لهذه المعايير. كما أيضا نطلب من الأخوة في بالنسبة ل يعني استعدادهم لتطبيق المعايير الدولية، وهذا خيار ليس إلزام الآن. من لديه المقدرة من الشركات الكبيرة أن يقدم لنا القوائم المالية معدة وفقا لمعايير المحاسبة الحالية وقوائم مالية معدة وفقا للمعايير الدولية، هذه سيعطيه نوع من التدريب قبل أن يكون الأمر جد، وأيضا يعطينا فرصة أن نتعرف على المشاكل التي واجهت التطبيق. على سبيل المثال السابق يعدون حسب ما أذكر نوعين من القوائم المالية الدولية وفقا للمعايير الدولية وفقا للمعايير السعودية. نتمنى من الأخوان في سابق وصار التواصل ما بينهم أن يزودون بما واجهوه من صعوبات عند تطبيق المعايير الدولية في شركاتهم، الشركات الأم والشركات التابعة إذا كانوا يطبقوها. أيضا نطالب الأخوان شركة المراعي من الشركات الكبيرة، وهناك معيار الزراعة قد يكون هو من المعايير التي ستواجهنا في كيفية معالجة ما يسمى القيمة السوقية للأصول الحيوانية، لأنه لا يوجد خيار، وإنما يطلب المعيار أن يتم تسجيل الأصول الزراعية بالقيمة السوقية وليس هناك أوبشن. سننظر في حين عندما نبدأ دراسة معيار الزراعة. على من تطبق المعايير الدولية؟ المعايير الدولية حاليا احنا نطبق المعايير السعودية على الجميع، شركات مساهمة، مسؤولية محدودة، تضامن، مؤسسات. إذا راجع المحاسب القانوني يجب أن يتأكد أن المعايير التي طبقت هي معايير المحاسبة السعودية حتى وإن كانت مؤسسات صغيرة. المجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية أصدر نوعين من القوائم من المعايير، المعايير اللي هو فول فيرجن أو ما يسمى الكامل في المعايير، هذا مسمى جديد، الكامل في المعايير، كأني بديت أكتب كتب في الشريعة. الكامل في المعايير والمختصر في المعايير. فالمختصر الكامل للمعايير المفترض يطبق الشركات المساهمة، يعني هذا أرى ذلك الآن. وقد ينظر في تطبيق أيضا طلب من شركات المسؤولية المحدودة، أو ينظر في تفصيل ما هو الكبير والصغير، المنشآت الكبيرة والمنشآت الصغيرة، وينظر فيها، لأن هناك بعض الشركات حتى الخاصة رؤوس أموالها وأصولها أكبر بكثير من بعض الشركات المساهمة، فإذا طبقت عليها المعايير الصغيرة أو المعايير المختصرة قد يكون لا تعطي صورة واضحة لأعمال الشركة وفقا للمعايير الدولية. سنعمل إذن على إعداد أو يعني التأكد من وجود في المملكة نوعين من المعايير الكاملة والمعايير المختصرة للشركات أو المؤسسات الغير كبيرة. التحول أيضا يجب أن يكون وفق مراحل. اللجنة بذلت جهد في كيفية أن يكون التحول، هل تأخذها أبجديا أم تأخذها تسلسلا؟ لا، رأت أن يتم تجميع المعايير المتشابهة والمترابطة في مجموعات. فبعض المعايير، المجموعة الأولى مثلا تكونت من 12 معيار، ذكرت المعيار رقم 1، وبعض المعايير الأخرى لتتكلم عن إعداد المعايير، الأهداف وغيرها. أيضا لابد أن تكون مترابطة من حيث النوع. أيضا رأت اللجان الفنية أن يعمل على المعايير الدولية التي لا يتوقع أن يطرأ عليها تعديلات. في بعض المعايير في كلام أنها ستعدل، إذا أبقيناها ولم نبدأ في دراستها لأن خوفا من التعديلات، وإنما نتعامل معها المعيار بما يسمى التفاعل الآني مع مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية بدراسة المشاريع المعايير وإعطائهم آراءنا في المعيار قبل أن يصدر. طيب، هذا كأنني تطرقت لموضوع متابعة الإصدارات. أيضا مجلس أو لجنة معايير المحاسبة الدولية سيكون من ضمن مهامها متابعة المعايير التي تصدر على شكل ما يسمى مشاريع، وستعطي رأيها في هذه المشاريع قبل أن تصدر، ويكون رأي الهيئة إذا كان ذو اعتبار سيؤخذ فيه، إذا كان ذو حاجة لمجتمعنا أو لقيمنا سنتأكد بالأخذ به. إذا لم يوجد سيكون هناك على الأقل درسنا الموضوع، فلما يصدر المعيار نعرف أن المعيار هذا يتم تطبيقه، ولكن نحتاج إفصاح إضافي أو نختار نوع من الأوبشن دون الرجوع مرة ثانية إلى دوامة دراسة المعايير بالكامل. طيب، بالنسبة للمحاسبة عن المعاملات المتوافقة مع الشريعة والمراجعة الشرعية، هناك الآن توجه كبير في مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية ينظر في مدى تأثر المعايير الدولية حاليا بما يسمى بالبيوع الإسلامية والإسلاميك ترانزاكشن وتأثيرها على المعايير. كما تعلمون الجهة التي أصدرت الكثير فيما يتعلق بالبيوع الإسلامية وأيضا المشتقات الإسلامية وغيرها هي منظمة أو ما يسمى بأيوفي في البحرين. هناك الآن لجنة استشارية شكلها مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولي للنظر في كيف تتأثر المعايير الحالية بمتطلبات الشريعة، والهيئة عضوا فيها. أيضا هناك ما يسمى المراجعة الشرعية، سيكون هناك في ما يسمى دورات تدريبية، شهادات مهنية في ما يسمى المراجعة الشرعية، بدلا من فقط الاعتماد على اللجان الشرعية المكونة من عدة أشخاص قد يكونوا مكررين في أكثر من شركة وأكثر من بنك. هؤلاء سيعينونها تلك اللجان أيضا في الأمور التي يتم اتخاذ القرار هذا إنه متوافق التعامل هذا بشرعي أو غير شرعي. وليس لنا علاقة صراحة في إعداد معايير، ولكن سننظر في المستقبل، وليس الآن وليس بعد سنة أو سنتين أو 3 أو 5، سننظر في هذا الأمر، علما أن أيوفي تعد شهادات في هذا الأمر. طيب، الدور المستقبلي للهيئة، المشاركة في اللجان والمجالس الدولية. أنا أشجع الجميع على المشاركة. المجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولي عنده لجان كثيرة، الاتحاد الدولي للمحاسبين عنده لجان كثيرة، ودوريا يفتحون المجال للترشيح. وأنا أعتقد أننا نحن الآن في وضع خاصة بالمملكة، من يعمل بالمملكة في وضع جيد أن يكون له قبول في تلك اللجان. هناك معلومات كاملة عن هيئة المحاسبين والمهنة لدى الاتحاد الدولي للمحاسبين. نعتبر الدولة الأولى، أقولها وبفخر وأيضا بثقة، التي تتعاون مع الاتحاد الدولي للمحاسبين في جميع الأمور. فذكر لنا أن الهيئة السعودية هي أحد الهيئات المهنية 16 عالميا اللي يمكن الاستعانة بها في تطوير المهن. أيضا البنك الدولي يتعاون معنا في هذا الأمر في تطوير بعض الجهات المهنية والتعرف على الممارسات التي نقوم فيها في إعداد المعايير ومدى التزام في نظام الرقابة ما يسمى الكواليتي كنترول بروجرام، رقابة الجودة وغيره. فهناك فرصة كبيرة لأحدكم أن يكون في تلك اللجان. والله الحمد، ولأول مرة على مستوى العالم الإسلامي أيضا تم ضم ممثل المملكة في ما يسمى مجلس أمناء مؤسسة المعايير الدولية، وهي أعلى منظمة أو أعلى جهة تشرف على معايير المحاسبة الدولية، وهذا لأول مرة يحدث في العالم الإسلامي. أيضا لنا عضوية في مجموعة الاقتصادات الناشئة في مجموعة ال20، وأيضا لنا عضوية في مجموعة معدي المعايير في آسيا وأقنوسيا، وكذلك مؤخرا لنا عضوية اللجنة الاستشارية لمساعدة مجلس معايير المحاسبة الدولية في المواضيع ذات العلاقة بالشريعة. الدور المستقبلي ارسلوا ملاحظات، ادرسوا المعايير، واذكروا انكم من المملكه العربيه السعوديه في ارسالكم الملاحظات على اوراق النقاش، لانها توجد تكتب لكم، تكتب باسمكم في اوراق العمل لدى مجلس معايير المحاسبه الدوليه. ايضا نقترح مواضيع، اذا كان هناك موضوع محتاجين يصدر فيه معيار نرفق لهم ونقترح الموضوع الفلاني. اقترحت احد المجموعات اللي ذكرتها عن موضوع محاسبه التكافل، مشروع معيار محاسبه التكافل في عن طريق دوله ماليزيا، وايضا هناك دراسه عن هذا الامر لدى مجلس معايير المحاسبه الدوليه. هذه بعض من الادوار المستقبليه. يمكن الاطلاع على المشروع او الخطه التنفيذيه عن موقع الهيئه. اخرا وليس اخيرا، هناك تحول كبير الان في المجتمع السعودي المحاسبي فيما له علاقه بمعايير المحاسبه وايضا ايداع القوائم الماليه. الهيئه مع وزاره التجاره تعمل على مشروع وطني، مشروع لاول مره قد يكون في العالم العربي، اللي هو ما يسمى الاكسبرال اكستنسبل بزنس ريبورتنج لانجويج، او ما يسمى بمختصرنا الاي فايلنج، ان تكون جميع القوائم الماليه المراجعه من محاسب قانوني تودع في جهاز واحد، اللي هو يعني منصه الكترونيه. هذا سيغني وسيمنع ما يسمى بالدوبليكيت فاينانشال ستيتمنت، سيمنع والله قوائم ماليه للبنوك، قوائم ماليه لمصلحه الزكاه، او قوائم ماليه لزوجة صاحب الملك، وقوائم ماليه لصاحب الملك نفسه. ايضا سيتيح لنا ايضا فرصه للتعرف على القوائم الماليه التي تراجع. الان وزاره التجاره تقول والله شركات المساهمه والمسؤوليه المحدوده التي تراجع عددها 28,000 شركه. المحاسبين قالوا والله ترى احنا ما راجعنا كل المراجعه 13,250 عمليه، في 15,000 من قاعد يراجعها. إذن لابد هذا يعطينا مؤشر. مصلحة الزكاة والدخل يقول والله احنا اللي يقدم لنا قوائم مالية 21,000، إذن هناك 28,000، هنا 21,000 وهنا 13,000. إذن هناك معلومات غير واضحة. المشروع هذا سيحلها، سيبين أين الخلل، هل بالفعل عندنا 28,000 أو أقل أو أكثر. كذلك سيساعد البنوك في اتخاذ القرارات بسرعة باعتماد على هذه المعلومات المتوفرة إلكترونيا دون التدخل البشري في حسابات، في التحليل المالي، في حسابات عند إعطاء القروض وغيرها من المعلومات. لا أريد أن أطيل عليكم، ولكن أشكركم مرة أخرى على حسن الاستماع، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Our next speaker is Jahanzeb Khan. He's a senior manager with KPMG and has been working in Saudi Arabia for the last 5 years. He has over 12 years of experience with KPMG, and primary experience being in external audits of entities providing financial services. He has extensive experience under today's topic IFRS, and has also been involved in the US GAAP conversion projects. He's worked with a sole share depository service provider in Pakistan as a senior manager in their finance department, primarily focusing on planning and budgeting. Gentlemen, please welcome Jahanzeb Khan from KPMG.
Assalamu alaikum. I do apologize in advance. I contracted the flu a couple of days ago, so my throat isn't at its best. I'm going to talk to you about convergence of Saudi accounting standard with the IFRS. The agenda for today is we're going to talk about the global adoption status, the challenges and considerations that generally come with adopting IFRS, IFRS issues in the Middle East, and then finally some key differences that are there between SOCPA standards and international accounting standards. Now, what does convergence actually mean? I mean, for past few decades, it has been a goal of international markets to have a unified set of accounting standards which is used internationally, so that with the underlying goal to ensure comparability and drive international investment. So who uses IFRS today? All the listed companies in the European Union require their listed companies to be compliant with IFRS and issue their financial statements under IFRS. In sorry. Okay. Also, you have countries like Australia, Hong Kong, Jamaica, Pakistan, South Africa, around 100 others who are preparing financials and who are requiring their companies in one way or another to prepare and present their financial statements under IFRS. Now, you can say the extent of application varies from country to country. Like if you take Australia, for example, Australia requires all of its companies to present their financial statement under IFRS. However, in the European Union, only the listed companies are required to present their financial statements under IFRS. All the other companies it is left to the individual countries and their regulators to determine which financial reporting framework they would like to use. Now, if you look at the world map over here, you can see which countries have adopted IFRS and since when. You will notice that Singapore is not, there's not a specific, thank you. There's not a specific year mentioned against Singapore. Singapore has adopted IFRS, but what they've done is that they've instituted their own version of financial reporting standards, which is largely in convergence with it, although they have not adopted a few of the IFRS. The major economies that what we feel would accelerate the convergence project are one, China. They have substantially converged their local accounting standards with IFRS, but not completely. India is one of the key players in this effort. Although they have made the plan and everything, however, their parliament has to approve the plan to move from Indian GAAP to IFRS. Japan is another country where there is an option available to the companies listed on the stock exchange to present their financial statements under IFRS. But the option has been available for a number of years, though if you would look at the statistics, they are not that encouraging. Around 20 companies out of total 3,600 listed on the stock exchange actually choose to present their financial statements under IFRS. The US, of course, the major focus of the convergence project has been to minimize the differences that are there between IFRS and US GAAP. Although initially the thought was that US market would eventually move to IFRS, though that is not clear whether it will happen. We doubt it that it will ever happen. However, we do anticipate more convergence between IFRS and the US GAAP. To take an example of the IFRS 8, which deals with disclosure of operating segments, the comparable US GAAP standard is similar to that of IFRS 8. However, the only difference between is the scope. Certain SEC entities which are not listed are also covered under that standard. However, IFRS 8 only applies to listed entities. Now, the Middle East and South Asia, who are the adopters? You have Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Lebanon, UAE, Oman, Jordan. Sri Lanka and Maldives have recently adopted IFRS. All the financial institutions in Saudi Arabia, being banking institutions and insurance companies, do present their financial statements under IFRS. Now, who are the non-IFRS adopters? You have Egypt, which have their own Egyptian standards, which are largely based on international accounting standards that were applicable back in 2005. Iraq, there is no clarity on when they'll move to IFRS. However, their company law does provide that in the 97 company law does say that all companies should be presenting their financial statements under IFRS. Now, what are the key challenges and considerations that adopters globally face when they choose to switch to IFRS? Now, local financial requirement number one that they have to consider is there scope within the local law to present financial statements under IFRS? I'll give you an example of the US market, where if you are a SEC registrant, if you are regulated by the Security and Exchange Commission of the US, then yes, you are required to present your financial statements under US GAAP. However, if you are not a SEC regulated corporation, you have the option to present general purpose financial statements under any financial reporting framework of your choosing. Now, some companies in the US are mandated to present their financial statements under US GAAP, reason being that the funding agencies or the banks that they require funding from require them to present their financial statements under US GAAP. However, there is option for companies whose parents or significant operations are outside the US to be able to present their financials under IFRS. Now, does the entity need to use IFRS? Again, this is a question for those markets where it is permitted for companies to be able to present financial statements in IFRS rather than the locally acceptable GAAP. Now, do the regulatory authorities accept IFRS, such as Ministry of Commerce? Will they accept IFRS presented financial statements? Will the tax authorities support IFRS? Will the banks or the other funding agencies accept financials if they are presented under IFRS? What the additional disclosures or information that is required from your own management information system to be able to prepare financials that are compliant with IFRS and they give all the disclosures required? Now, again, this would be vary from case to case because not all companies will have sophisticated disclosures involved. Number two is the users and the comparability. Now, in IFRS, there are allowed alternative treatments, like you can choose to, for example, carry your property, plant, and equipment at either using the cost model or the fair value model. No, those are the considerations that companies will have to make. Like, look, we have options available. This is going to be different. Comparability might be an issue. Now, initially beginning, of course, over time, standardization would occur and similar transactions would be easier to be dealt with by the company's own accounting system, but that would take time. Initially, it's going to involve some time and cost. Financial statement would be easier to understand. People who are not familiar with your own local GAAP would be able to, once you present financial statements under IFRS, they will be able to easily understand your financial statements. Now, what are the business impacts? There is possibility of impacting your ratios. Maybe the local GAAP and the IFRS would have issues with what is classified as current and what is classified as non-current. So, if the previous year financial you were preparing under your local GAAP and come next year you present your financials under IFRS, your ratios are distorted because what used to be current now is non-current perhaps. There's going to be impact on your taxes and zakat because of the impact on your profit and loss account that might occur. Again, then there's impact on dividends and impact on management compensation as well. Now, what are the potential benefits? I mean, if you look at the survey that was taken by most of the accounting bodies, 80% of accountants prefer and support the Convergence project. What it does is say that we expect that the streamlining reporting would reduce costs and bring efficiencies over time, because for those companies who have foreign operations or have foreign holding companies, they have to right now prepare financial statements under two different frameworks. They have to present, for locally they use SOCPA, and for internationally they have to present their financials in IFRS. Those would be done away with. They will be presenting financials in one framework. There will be common reporting and processes and systems across the whole group, which would again reduce costs. The ability for your finance professionals to move around in your group move around borders as well without boundaries, that would also enable to give them exposure, and it's easier for them to move around. And you have consistency in statutory reporting. Now, there are some alternatives associated with first-time adoption, which is specified in IFRS 1. One of the potential benefits that is also highlighted is that it will be easier for corporations to obtain external financing, foreign currency financing. because of the easier to understand financials, and it would also facilitate international mergers and acquisitions. Now, if a local company in Saudi Arabia has competitors in Europe, Japan, or US, you can see that, okay, if you have European or Canadian competitors, your customers or yourself can compare your financial performance with them because you'll be preparing under a similar accounting framework. Now, what are the likely challenges? What the corporation would have to do is have an impact assessment of how the adoption of IFRS would affect them as a company. Smaller companies, it is not anticipated that they will face much challenges. However, larger groups with foreign operations and diversified products would face issues with in implementing IFRS framework and coming up with the required disclosures. They will have to plan sufficiently upfront depending on the magnitude of the change involved. They will have to upgrade and adapt systems to be able to generate the required disclosures, because in a situation where you have a large corporation, you do not want to manually prepare disclosures that are required under IFRS. In order to minimize disruption to businesses and ongoing operations, the corporations will have to renegotiate some of the terms of their contracts, like debt agreements, that, okay, now going forward, the covenants would apply to IFRS related, IFRS financials, so perhaps a ratio that was, a covenant that was applicable under SOCPA should be re-looked at when financials will be presented under IFRS. There has to be a determination of how your zakat and taxation expense would be affected, and coordinate with the external audit for the first time adoption, how your financials and when your financials are going to be finalized. Now, what are the IFRS issues in the Middle East? There is increased complexity involved. There is increased disclosure requirements, increased use of fair values, too many changes, and strict application. We do not have an option to apply IFRS Lite. Now, for changes ahead, these are the accounting standards. I'm sorry, I'm colorblind, so I can only assume they're blue and green. So there are standards which have been published, and there are standards which have to be interpretations, and some have been published and some have to be confirmed as of now. Everybody's favorite financial instruments impairment is delayed till 2017, so I don't think that's a bad news. Now, what does the SOCPA's IFRS convergence project is about? Now, what we're going to discuss, what's an introduction to the project, what the timeline and key challenges are, and what the initiative taken by the local corporates to date, and what we believe are the steps ahead and future outlook. Now, the approach that has been taken up by SOCPA is that to look at the individual standards and make sure that they comply with local regulatory requirement, or they need any modification due to Sharia requirement, present it to the SOCPA board for approval, and then have an ongoing review for future amendments and modifications, and then again review standards, assess the need for changes. Now, SOCPA has come up with a target that listed companies should be presenting their financial statements under IFRS for the year ended 2017. The standards have been combined in 14 groups, covering 40 standards in total, and the related interpretations. Now, the review of the first group of standards has been completed, including roundtable discussions. First group of exposure draft has already been released, and the further drafts are expected to be released pretty soon. Now, the key questions that which are being considered here is one, that will early adoption be allowed? Of course, SOCPA has made the decision that it's going to be a switch off and switch on approach, that you have to apply all the standards on day one. So what are the key challenges that this local market has at the moment. We believe that it is an issue with availability of consultants with knowledge of both IFRS and the Saudi standards. There are some options that should be reconsidered with an IFRS, keeping in view the level of maturity of local practice and any specific local requirements such as zakat, Sharia compliance, convergence of complex standards such as IFRS 9, monitoring the progress of the project. This is a huge project. It needs ongoing monitoring. Meeting the requirements of key stakeholders and major market players. Considering fair valuation of assets. Now you have to understand IFRS would like to have fair value being used for almost every asset and liability. Now the market in Saudi Arabia does not have experienced valuers that could provide you with an objective fair valuation. In translation of IFRS, converse standards will be issued in Arabic with only modification made by SOCPA to be included as an appendix. Now what are the initiatives that have been taken by local corporations? To date, we have not seen much progress on this front. There hasn't been a huge effort as such. However, certain large Saudi companies have started to make an impact assessment of how the financial statement presentation and disclosures would be affected, how their accounting policy manuals be affected, what are the current accounting treatments compared to what the IFRS specify. With the exposure draft coming out soon, we believe that there's going to be further acceleration in this process, and more companies will increase their efforts towards assessing how this convergence project will affect their companies. Now SOCPA is committed to meet the published plan. They want to have the listed companies present their financial statements based on IFRS for 2017. Consultants are reviewing the various standards. Key factors that drive the project is the early adoption option, one-time implementation of the standards, the SME criteria, and how IFRS 1 would be applied in our situation. Now there are some key differences between IFRS and SOCPA, which I'm going to discuss here. However, please note that this is not an exhaustive list. This is some of the key differences that we thought were relevant to us. Of course, balance sheet is termed as statement of financial position in IFRS. Otherwise, the name of, you have an option of statement of income you have a statement of comprehensive income, and there is an option to either present it in one statement or present it in a two-statement form, statement of income and statement of comprehensive income. And then there is a change in the sequence of the financial statement where you have equity coming before cash flow. Otherwise, there is no difference. Now, extraordinary items. SOCPA requires that extraordinary items be disclosed separately. However, IFRS do not give that option anymore. Non-current liability classification. IFRS specifically requires that if any reclassification or exemption from a breach of covenant is taken, it has to be taken before the reporting date to be able to continue to classify a long-term liability as a long-term liability. However, SOCPA would ask you to consider all the facts up to the date of the approval of the financial statements. Further, SOCPA would also specify that if you have a contractual arrangement to settle your short-term liability with another long-term asset, then you should classify your liability as a long-term liability instead of a short-term liability. Expense classification. There is a specific accounting standard from SOCPA on administrative and marketing expenses, which specify that the companies should disclose their general and admin and selling and marketing expenses separately on the face of their statement of income. However, IFRS do give you some flexibility of presenting some of the expenses from outside the general and admin expenses. As far as intangible assets go, and property, plant, and equipment for that matter as well. Only the cost model is allowed by SOCPA accounting standards, whereas IFRS would give you an option to carry those at fair value as well. Inventories. Now, SOCPA standards would prefer that inventories are measured at weighted average, or if FIFO or LIFO method are used by the corporation, then a disclosure has to be made what is the monetary difference between had the inventories been measured at weighted average. IFRS allow both FIFO and weighted average method, but does not specify any preference. However, LIFO method is prohibited. Now, in SOCPA standards, reversal of inventory write-down has not been covered. Capitalization of borrowing costs. Now, under SOCPA, capitalization of borrowing cost is limited to long-term fixed assets only, which takes a substantial period of time. However, inventory has not been covered. Under IFRS, since certain requirements are met, then inventory can be, for inventory you can also capitalize certain borrowing costs. Impairment. Impairment is computed the same way as IFRS. However, there is one difference with SOCPA, where it says if the total undiscounted cash flows exceed the carrying value, then no impairment assessment is required. Leases. IFRS generally follow a principle-based approach as opposed to US GAAP, which is more rule-based. And in terms of leases as well, SOCPA has been very prescriptive, and you have to satisfy only one of the 4 conditions to be able to classify a lease as a finance lease. That being that 90% of the present value of the minimum lease payment should be equal to or greater than the value of the asset. If the lease is for the term of 75% or more of the life of the asset, or there's a bargain purchase option or a transfer of ownership at the end of the lease term, then a lease would classify as a finance lease. Property, plant, and equipment, as I explained before, is that the fair value option is not covered. Component accounting is also not covered under SOCPA. Useful life, IFRS require companies to reevaluate their useful life at every reporting date. However, SOCPA specifies that if there is an indication that the useful life has changed, then and only then a reassessment should be carried out. Financial instrument accounting, not much guidance available on financial instruments. However, the key difference is that at initial recognition is at cost rather than fair value, which is a departure from IFRS. That would mean that you would not have a day one profit and loss under SOCPA. Loan and receivable classification is not available under SOCPA. Transfer between categories of financial instruments is generally permitted, which is under IFRS much more difficult. There is no guidance available for how to account for derivatives and hedge accounting. However, because SOCPA does specify that if SOCPA is silent on certain aspect of accounting, then reference should be made to IFRS. However, when corporations do take guidance from IFRS in terms of accounting is concerned, we have noticed that disclosure is not consistently applied as required by IFRS. Now, in IFRS would specify that for financial instruments impairment, a decline in fair value which is either significant or prolonged is an indication of impairment. SOCPA would require that you have a significant and prolonged decline to be say that okay, perhaps this financial instrument is impaired. Lastly, they also specify that if a decline in fair value indicates a permanent nature of decline, then again impairment should be considered. When, in terms of foreign currency, the concept of functional currency has not been addressed by SOCPA. Post-employment employee benefits, IFRS are very detailed about it. However, SOCPA does not cover them specifically. However, there is a provision under SOCPA standard that long-term liabilities should be discounted. However, even now, most of the corporations would follow a simple approach of determining the liability of, okay, what if we close our company today, how much do I have to pay to my employee as end of service benefit, and they recognize that as their liability, and they do not use an actuarial valuation to determine the correct liability. Taxation and zakat, generally the same. If a company is wholly owned, has Saudi shareholders only or GCC shareholders, they will have the zakat expenses charged to statement of income. Similar with income tax, if the shareholders are 100% foreign, non-Saudi, non-GCC, then income tax expense is also taken to profit statement of income. However, if there's a situation where you have a mixed company, where there's a mixture of Saudi shareholders and foreign shareholders, then zakat and income tax is taken directly to equity, which is again a departure from IFRS. Deferred tax requirements are similar to IFRS, however, there is much more detail available in IFRS compared to SOCPA standards. Deferred tax assets, SOCPA in line with US GAAP gives you the option to, requires you to present deferred tax assets and liabilities in long-term and short-term. However, IFRS permits non-current classification only. Point to note over here is that a proposal is being considered at ISB level that they will also require deferred tax assets and liabilities to be classified under long-term and short-term classification. Well, that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
And large family businesses. He is an active member of SOCPA, participating in many of the SOCPA's activities, including the quality review program of CPA firms in Saudi Arabia, where the work of CPA firms were examined by SOCPA. Sitting next to him is Casey Blatch, who is the Financial Planning Reporting Manager for the Al Marai Group. Casey is an experienced finance manager who graduated from the Otago University, New Zealand, with a double degree in law and commerce. He was a member of the New Zealand Institute of Chartered Accountants in 2007, and his experience is based in public practice in New Zealand, which comprises of tax, advisory, insolvency, and valuations. And more recently with Al Marai in Saudi Arabia, which is financial reporting, regulatory compliance, control design, and integrated channel change management. Next to him is Gavin Leake. He is the Senior Auditor and Advisory Director for Deloitte. He started his career probably and became the youngest appointed partner, and I can't believe that was at the age of 28. And you can guess what is his age now. Now, during his career, he's led many international audit and advisory teams of professionals across many sectors and cross borders in many jurisdictions. Professionally, he is a chartered accountant in New Zealand, South Africa, England and Wales, and also a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Management Accountants, and also being a member of the Institute of Corporate Treasurers, UK. And finally, next to him is Mohammed Suhail Nini, who is the Executive Director Assurance for the Ernst & Young office in Saudi Arabia. Suhail has got over 12 years of post-qualification experience. His portfolio of audit clients include commercial banks, investment banks, power and utility companies, multinational contracting and trading companies. It's across the gamut. He is involved in providing accounting advice on complex treasury products, financial structures, and service concession arrangements. Recent experience in conducting training for IFRS and Saudi Arabian GAAP. The panel is going to be moderated by Mohammed Farhan, who is the Associated Director for KPMG Transaction and Restructuring Advisory Services in Saudi Arabia. And his experience includes extensive financial due diligence, valuation, and business model knowledge. He's got over 12 years of professional experience, and he's a fellow member of ACCA and an associated member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. So over to Farhan to kickstart the debate.
Let me start the panel discussion by asking a question from Dr. Magamis. That Mr. Magamis, regarding the convergence process, now there may be some IFRSs which may require any change in law because they are not complying with the current laws applicable in Saudi Arabia, or if they are not really complying with the Sharia laws. So what is the stance SOCPA is going to take? Either it's customizing the IFRSs or any other option you're considering?
Okay, I think السؤال بيسأل تأثيرات الأخوة. Most of the people they speak Arabic, so I have to translate in Arabic and English. يسأل عن مدى تأثيرات تحول المعايير الدولية قد تتعارض مع الأنظمة أو الشريعة وما عملته الهيئة. The answer actually the answer is the process for that transition. We take care of three, or we study the stand from 3 key points. First, we look at the does the international standards in accounting or auditing violate or contradict with any laws. Any laws, when I speak about laws, I'm talking about the law of companies, the CMA, SAMA, whatever it is. And does it also contradict with any Islamic requirement, and with the difficulties or the problems that faced those who has practiced or implemented the IFRS. After that, we send a letter to CMA, SAMA, and Zakat department, asking them, do you have any concern, any problems, any things that contradict with any laws that we did not come up with or we did not cross? And we have letters from them. They said it's fine with us, there is no need to change the standard because of the laws. لما نعد المعايير احنا ندرس المعيار من 3 جهات او من 3 نقاط. نقطة مدى تأثير المعايير أو تأثر الأنظمة أو معارضة الأنظمة للمعايير، تكلم نظام الشركات، نظام سوق المال والأنظمة اللي تصدرت مؤسسة النقد. ثانيا مدى تعارضها مع الشريعة إذا كانت متطلبات الشريعة الإسلامية، وأيضا مدى صعوبة التطبيق وغيره. ووجدنا وأيضا خاطبنا مؤسسات النقد وسوق المال ومصنع الزكاة إذا كان هناك أي تعارض، ولله الحمد ذكروا أن لا يوجد أي تعارض. When it comes for these things, we have made now clear that there is no contradict between any laws that we found, and we asked the help of those who are in the field of law, actually, not SOCPA. We have conducted studies. Some people from Pakistan for Sharia, and they are very good in Islamic transaction and Sharia, whatever related to business, and those who are working with departments in the some of the big 4 actually, and all these people have mentioned there is no contradict between IFRS and the requirement of Sharia. I will elaborate more when it comes how we tackle actually the needs of those who are in need to have more information about Sharia, or make sure that the investment is according to Sharia. I will elaborate more in it when the question comes.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. And from that, if I take that you are already taking inputs from CMA or Zakat, but how you are ensuring that you are taking inputs from the auditing firms and the companies, either listed companies or non-listed companies, and also the banks, because ultimately the financial statements which are prepared on IFRS basis submitted to the banks, and there may be actually major changes, maybe because of the revaluation of assets, because of the hedging, because of the derivatives. So how you're ensuring the inputs?
يسأل عن مدى أخذ رأي الجهات الأخرى مثل اللي يعملون في البنوك ومكاتب المحاسبة والشركات. Regarding this question, actually, when it comes for the committee that is taking care of this transition project, it consists of people from these groups, from banks, from financial institutions, let's call it, from auditors, and from academia, and also from call it government agencies. So everybody is taking his part in reviewing and agreeing on the standard that we studied, and if we find any things that need to be changed, already they have known about it. Also, when I spoke a little earlier about the round table, we have mentioned that to make sure to bring the people from these sectors to practice or to participate in the discussions. Also, it's open to the public from any place in the website. They can participate in our project by using email or letters, or they can come and visit us. بالنسبة لي وش عملنا علشان نتأكد أن جميع الجهات أعطت رأيها في المعايير من قبل المحاسبين، الجهات الحكومية والمشرفين على الأسواق، سوق المال وغيره. هم يمثلون في اللجان الفنية، يعملون مع اللجان الفنية ويشاركون في الطاولة المستديرة، ويشاركون أيضا في إعطاء الرأي عن طريق الاتصال بالهيئة، وأيضا عن طريق الإيميلات أو الرسائل أو الحضور شخصيا.
Okay, so what I understand actually that it's a two-way process. You also contacted CMA, DZIT, and you can be contacted by any stakeholder actually. And this will actually lead to my question to Mr. Khalil, that Khalil, now since the process has already started and the timeline has already been defined, so have you already started communicating to your listed clients mostly, and how you are actually going to take because I divide this into planning, transition and completion phase. So how you are going to handle the transition phase when you have 2017 financial IFRS and 16 financial SOCPA?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الدكتور سنة حسنة إن شاء الله. فأنا ببدأ بالترجم للعربي وأتكلم بالعربي وأترجم للغة الإنجليزية خلينا نقول، ولكن برضه بضع تحدي عند الزملاء على اليمين. The doctor started talking both languages and I'm going to do the same. So you have to prepare yourself to do the same. I don't know how I'm going to do, but you have to. السؤال بالعربي خليني أبدأ عن مدى الآن مع هالخطة وعملية التحول اللي قاعدة تصير، كيف عملية التواصل مع العملاء للاستعداد لهذا الموضوع. حقيقة يبدو أن الموضوع لا زال ينظر له من العملاء على استحياء، وقليل منهم هم تقريبا الشركات الكبيرة جدا اللي عندها تعاملات عالمية، عندها أصلا بعض شركاتها الخارجية أصلا تعد قوائم مالية وفقا لIFRS وخلافه، بدأت فعلا بحركة بالتحرك في هذا الجانب وتعمل مثلا دراسة تحليل للفروقات وكيف راح يكون تأثيرها وش الخطوات اللي يجب أن يقوموا فيها وخلافه. ولكن بصورة مبدئية يعني بدأوا حديثهم الداخلي النقاش حول الموضوع، بحيث أنه يبدأون خطة عملهم مثلا خلال عام 2014 والقيام بأعمال حقيقية لإنجاز هذا الأمر أو التعاقد مع مستشارين وخلافه. الحديث مع العملاء فيها لا زال أعتقد في بداياته. نحن يعني كل أصبح مدار حديث، واحد من النقاط اللي تثار في الاجتماعات مع العملاء أنه الآن السوكبا أو المعايير المحلية الآن تتوجه للمعايير الدولية وصدرت المجموعة الأولى، وكيف استعدادكم، ما هو تصوركم لها، وكيف ستتعاملون مع هذا الموضوع. هل في فعلا نلمس وجود تحرك أو استجابة حقيقية من بعض من العملاء؟ زي ما قلت يعتمد على حجم العميل وطبيعة أعماله وطبيعة فريق العمل اللي موجود، لكن لا شك أن الموضوع سيكون تحدي كبير جدا لكثير من الشركات والمؤسسات من ناحيته. قد يكون في وجهة نظر أنه في كثير من الشركات والمؤسسات قد تواجه أو تكون العقبة الأكبر هي من حيث أنه بعض المتطلبات تتعلق بإفصاحات كثيرة لم يعتد عليها سواء المعد القوائم المالية أو القارئ، لأن متطلبات المعايير الدولية من حيث الإفصاح صراحة مفصلة وأكبر بكثير من ما تطلبه المعايير في الصورة الحالية. In regard to the discussion with the clients for IFRS convergence and what steps this has been happening in this regard, I think in general there is no real, I haven't noticed that there is real big steps from most of the companies, except for a few major companies and big players where they have also presence and subsidiaries out of the country, where those ones already preparing their financials under IFRS, etc. So in those cases, you find them that they're more prepared, and I wouldn't say that they are fully prepared or they are ready for that. They are more prepared, they have a better awareness. So they started doing some more detail or discussing, either some of them started doing some internal analysis and sort of creating their own initial plans on how they're going to deal with it, what they should do during 2014. And I'm very hopeful that after announcing the first group of the standard, that SOCPA in terms of the convergence to IFRS or التحول, they will be also, once the second and third group comes over the 2014, that will really create a real platform for the people to really focus on this matter and try to work on it and understand the importance of it.
Okay, thank you, Khalil. As I understood from Khalil's discussion, there are a few companies who have already started working on that. And Cassie, is Almarai one of them? Yeah, that is my question, that what are steps you are taking actually, and are you going to change your systems, or you are going to actually take specific steps in this planning stage to implement the IFRSs?
Okay, in terms of the steps that Almarai's taken so far, it started with internal resource. So we need to make sure that we have the competence in-house to deal with the change. So we've been actively recruiting, and we have what we believe a strong and adequate team on board today. And this team is coming from a number of backgrounds. The most recent hire has come from Big Four out of Singapore. From there, we're currently going through a gap analysis in terms of understanding the difference of what we currently do and what is required under IFRS.
Okay.
Now again, this has its limitations. In terms of understanding the gap between SOCPA and IFRS is only half of the requirements. We need to understand what the requirements of the Saudi version of IFRS is going to be. So, and we can't complete that until Saudi IFRS is developed. Is it going to be wildly different or significantly different from IFRS, or is it basically going to be a carbon copy with limited choices? So some of that we need to understand. Once we complete our gap analysis, we will then go through and understand what is required to go and make the change. This will involve a review of our systems. At this stage, we're not anticipating significant system enhancement being required from the change. We believe that we have a very robust system. It's a matter of collecting and reporting the data. The majority of the changes are likely for Almarai to be from a reporting or disclosure perspective, as opposed to a data collection. And then finally, once we understand, have determined and quantified and assessed the complete changes required, we then need to start communicating with relevant stakeholders. So it's users of financial information internally, it's our executive, it's our shareholders, our bankers, and so forth. So ultimately, all users of our financial statements need to understand how it's going to be different.
Okay, so I think you'll need support of Gavin actually. So Gavin, how you're going to support the clients who want to implement IFRS, and how you're going to support SOCPA even?
So at the moment, we have issued a communication to all departments. I'm sure that other big four firms have done. So we have started the awareness setting for our class. And the reaction has been one of, well, this is interesting. Maybe 2014, maybe a good year to begin this process. Although I have been working recently with large corporate in moving the accounting policy manual from an historical position to one that is reasonably consistent with IFRS. And this is the stepping stone that they are using as part of the migration to ultimately move to a full-fledged IFRS position. We do a lot of things within our organisation, and all, as you know, banks and insurance companies are following IFRS. So the knowledge base of IFRS is fairly growing within our organisation. And I think that we're in a good position to help the clients. So as Casey said, that the first step is to realise that this is a big deal. This is not going to go away. 2017 is around the corner. which only means 2014 and 15, you've got to position yourself to be able to keep the system in place, resources in place, have you done your gap analysis, understood exactly which is the rate. And I think, the big four firms are in a good position to help our clients navigate. But it is something that clients have to seriously consider. It is a big deal. All countries that are getting involved in when they migrated, it has been a major step. I mean, just to get back on 2000, when companies had to think about the whole transition to IFRS, that it was going to switch over. It's the same issue. In the sense of making sure that your systems are going to be in place to be able to get the information. Bigger companies have got more sophisticated systems.
Yeah.
Smaller companies don't. So these are things that we have to consider and making sure that your resources are got to understand IFRSs implementation.
But you may need to increase your resources also.
Yes, which is part of the reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
So I think most of the firms are seeing that this is gearing up. But you will start seeing our training programs migrate from an existing SOCPA framework to becoming more increasingly IFRS.
Okay. And so here actually, as you are the IFRS trainer also, and you know the gaps between SOCPA and IFRSs, so in this planning stage, are you going to do some kind of exercise with the clients where you identify the differences and the impact of those differences so they are better prepared for the transition phase and going forward?
Right. This is a very valid question that you raised. The first step into any sort of convergence, meaning IFRS, is a huge subject that any organization in Saudi Arabia, first step we have to do is to have a gap analysis. In order to have a gap analysis, then we must have resources equipped with both IFRS and SOCPA knowledge. So yes, you're right that this is the first step that we have to do. At UI and other big four firms and other audit firms in Saudi Arabia, the first step that all of us are taking is that to increase our resources and credibility to understand IFRS, to have an accreditation done for both IFRS and SOCPA, and then move toward that direction. As Gavin and colleagues mentioned, and Casey also mentioned that the seriousness is very, very important. And gone are those days when we used to say that the business drives the accounting. The accounting drives the business. Again, all the key decisions nowadays to make what will be the accounting impact on balance sheet and income statement. So this is very important for all of us to take it seriously.
But are you planning to add a kind of disclosure in 2016 which shows the impact of any kind of impact on the either on the profit loss account or even on retained earnings because of the implementation of IFRS next year? Is there any kind of plan to give a kind of early heads up to the user of the financial statements?
Yes, that's a very good question. At the moment, if IFRS 1 is adopted as it is right now, then we need to have 2017 is the top date for us. So, and for the public listed companies, they produce their first quarter financials. So I would assume that the disclosure, it's not a disclosure, you have to produce IFRS financial statements for 2015, 2016,
yes.
2017.
Exactly.
So you have to have IFRS financials from Q1 2016. So it's not going to be only disclosure. It's going to be prepared IFRS financials.
And what are the steps you are taking actually? Because as Gavin mentioned that 2017 is around the corner. So in 2014 you are starting communicating to the clients, or you are still waiting for a year to pass?
Well, actually, it's only 1 year left. Right?
Yeah, effectively.
Effectively, because we have already started creating the awareness in the market. This is something has to be done at a global level. Now, this session that we are having on is a very good opportunity for everyone to understand that this is coming. It's not going anywhere, as Gavin mentioned. It's going to come, and we all have to take it very seriously. So the awareness is being raised through our audit meetings, session IDs, in various IFRS seminars that all of the big four firms conduct on a regular basis. So we create that awareness.
And Dr. Madamis, actually, we have SOCPA members who are either will be preparing the financial statements in the companies or will be auditing the financial statements in the audit firms. So what's the plan actually to ensure that all the SOCPA members are very much aware of the IFRSs?
بالنسبة للسؤال عن أعضاء الهيئة ممن يعد القوائم المالية أو يراجع القوائم المالية استعداداتهم لتطبيق المعايير الدولية. Actually, the question is very interesting because SOCPA is also has or must do some kind of preparation of the audience, actually the users of the financial statement or the preparers of the financial statements through training programs. What we also through what we call it telling the audience that the standards or the project is going on, and we are going to do some kind of visiting, for example, universities, also to prepare students, to tell the students or those who are teaching the students to switch from the old books to the new books, which is based on IFRS. So within the next 3 years, we must have graduates from colleges, from universities that have studied actually IFRS or the international auditing standards. And this is hopefully next year, which is 2014, we are planning to make visits to a lot of Saudi universities to tell them about the project and to encourage the faculties to start teaching, actually to switch from the old books to the new materials, which is based on the IFRS or the international auditing standards. Also, what we did with the SOCPA, we started translating also a lot of materials, training materials, like the ones used by the European Union. They have very nice training programs, and we have now the license to translate it into Arabic and to start to do the training for those who are going to use the IFRS as a preparers, or those who are going to audit the financial statement based on the IFRS. So this is what we are doing. بالنسبة لاستعدادات الهيئة لتأكد من أن المعدين القوائم المالية من الأعضاء أو المحاسبين القانونيين، أن بدأنا بإعداد البرامج التدريبية المبنية على المعايير الدولية. كذلك بدأنا بالزيارات الميدانية للجامعات، وأيضا إخبارهم عن المشروع والاستعداد لتطبيق المعايير الدولية وتدريس المواد المعتمدة على المعايير الدولية في المحاسبة والمراجعة وعدم الانتظار، بالإضافة إلى القيام بترجمة أو البدء بترجمة بعض من الكتب التي تتطرق للمعايير الدولية في المحاسبة خاصة والمراجعة.
And Khalid, how you are training your staff actually for IFRS? Because ultimately they will be auditing actually based on IFRS rather than SOCPA for listed companies at least.
Well, I think the key point here, as you mentioned, is the fact that IFRS is largely used, especially when I talk about our firm, because we have banks, we have insurance companies, they are all using the IFRS. So effectively, it is part of the training agenda in general. But definitely, since this convergence program started, we did start putting more focus on the training we give to our staff for IFRS, to include a wider group of our employees that were not effectively exposed to IFRS day-to-day work with their clients, to IFRS training, and to ensure that they are going to be ready once the time is adopted and implemented in 2 years' time, effectively. So that's from when we talk in general about this stuff. السؤال كان عن عملية تدريب نحن والجهد اللي نبذله داخليا في مكتبنا في عملية تدريب الموظفين واستعدادهم للمعايير الدولية. واعتقد الحقيقة أنا في جانب مهم إنه في كثير من الموظفين عندنا بحكم ارتباطنا بالعملاء من البنوك وشركات التأمين اللي هي القوائم المالية وفق المعايير الدولية، فهذا يضع عدد كبير من الموظفين المحللين عندنا على ارتباط دائم بالمعايير الدولية. بالإضافة إلى ذلك فإحنا جزء من عملية التدريب السنوي عندنا فيها جزء إلزامي
من بداية ما أصبح هناك قرار بالتحول معايير الدولية أصبح زاد التركيز عندنا وزاد حتى في خطتنا بالمستقبل لتدريب موظفينا حتى يكون في المرحلة اللي يطبق فيها المعايير الدولية يكون فريق العمل بالكامل جاهز لها بصفة تامة، واعتقد هذا يعني من خلال نقاشي مع الاخوان في المكاتب الاخرى هو ما يقومون في بعض المكاتب، ويمكن بعض المكاتب الصغيرة او المتوسطة تحتاج ان تبذل جهد اكبر في هذا الجانب، ولا يخفى عنه الجهد اللي الاخوان في الهيئة يجب راح يقومون فيه، يجب ان يقومون فيه من خلال عقد دورات تدريبية متخصصة في هذا الجانب بشكل اكبر، والدكتور زي ما وضح الدكتور احمد يعني الهيئة متجهة في المجال وتذكر خطط ان شاء الله ونطلب منهم المزيد.
And Cassie, actually, if you talk about the first year audits, especially, will this IFRS implementation will make your life easy or difficult? And who can make it easy and who can make it difficult? I know the answer, but I want to hear from you.
A bit of both, to be honest. Our currently operates with international subsidiaries reporting under IFRS, so one framework will make our life easier to some extent. However, we are expecting additional disclosure requirements for group financials in Saudi Arabia, and that won't come without trouble.
Okay. And Gavin, are you going to make their life easy by supporting them? Because you know better than anyone. The auditing firms actually, as they are auditing the banks and the insurance companies and also the foreign subsidiaries. So with the better planning, we can make the life of the corporates easy rather than actually showing it as going to be difficult.
Well, I guess the question comes to that power fees. Power fees to make our food. No, I told you, it's not a question of difficulty, it's a question of working with the team to get through the challenge.
Yeah.
And together we can get through and deliver the first set of financial statements based on IFRS. I just want to reflect back on the presentation today earlier was on the differences with the SOCPA and IFRS. And I think based on my historical experience, there's a lot of subtlety and fundamental differences between SOCPA and IFRS, particularly around the focus on income statement and balance sheet. We have the concept of matching in the statement of concepts. You tend to find the focus is on income statement, because when you've got income, then the focus on trying to get the cost in, and you focus on the statement of income. But IFRS is focused on the balance sheet. We look at the elements of assets, liabilities, equity, and if it doesn't meet any of those elements, then it goes into the statement of income. So what IFRS is trying to do is make the income statement a lot more volatile, to demonstrate the risks associated with the income. Because the more volatile the statement of income is, the better information is fed into the share price in terms of risks. Whereas if you have a managed income statement, which is to some extent for those countries that haven't followed IFRS or haven't got their own frameworks, then you have a situation where you have income, you're trying to manage a profit. And what then happens is if you don't like to go into the income statement, you tend to put it into the balance sheet somehow. You find an asset that can somehow carry its cost or liability that's in a category of good value.
Okay.
So when you look at the differences, there are a lot more subtle differences that need to be highlighted. And these will be the challenges that we'll be going through, particularly when you start looking at whether certain provisions that have historically been made, provisions for loan losses that are perhaps not entirely consistent with IFRS. How does that look in the new framework when you put them on compliance? So these are challenges.
We have one more question from Sohail before we move to the audience, because we need to take questions from audience also. Sohail, we talk about 2017 a lot and listed companies. Now what about the non-listed companies? You know, actually, in Saudi Arabia, the family-owned businesses and even actually the establishments. 2018 onward, is it a kind of nightmare?
It's going to be, because as you rightly mentioned, that lot of the challenges on those businesses which are not necessarily family groups. And that's where our challenge is basically because, first of all, what we need to realize is that, they have to have bank loans because they also get bank facilities. The banks and the financial institutions will not accept any of the financial statement if the IFRS is actually standard in Saudi. So basically what they need to do is, and what we need to help them out is basically, is to create awareness first of all, and basically create an opportunity for them to get trained on IFRS. So yes, it's a challenge at the moment.
I think it's bigger than challenge.
Absolutely. Listed women, they have their own resources. They can arrange, and they are being audited by one of the large firms. But for the local businesses, they tend to go for the big tier audit firms, and that's where they also need to follow. They need to create their resources, people that are follow the IFRS challenges, and the local businesses.
Dr. Mohammed will be having the separate IFRSs for small and medium enterprises in order to just facilitate the process?
Yes, what we are going to do actually exactly like what IFRS or International Accounting Standard Board that has issued two type of standards, one for a small medium size and the other one is the full IFRS. نعم سيكون عندنا نوعين من المعايير، معايير خاصة بالشركات الكبيرة والمعايير الأخرى المختصرة للشركات الوسط والصغيرة. Until now we haven't decided which companies they should go for full IFRS or the small or summarized IFRS actually. This will be maybe the decision will be based on either SAMA or SEMA or the Ministry of Commerce that might ask. They might say, okay, go for all full IFRS, or might they said there is we are not really sure who is going to use full IFRS from as a company size or as a company kind actually.
I think this is actually yet to be decided, and a lot of other things yet to be decided, as we understand, and that was the purpose of having this session. But let's start actually talking about this, and let's take some questions from the audience also.
Yes, can we open the floor for questions to the audience? Please raise your hand, we'll send you the mic. Please also do identify yourself so that the panel is aware where the question is coming from. Can you have the mic there, please? Yeah.
خالد العديد جامعة السعودية. راح أسأل سؤال بالعربي والإنجليزي أي واحد يقدر يجاوب عليه من المشكلة. الآن لما يتعارض معيار دولي مع تنظيم محلي أمريكا كوريا الجنوبية مروا بس مشكلة فعدلوا التاكس كود النظام الضريبي وعرضوا تجربتهم باللقاء عام 2011 دنفر لقاء الجمعية الأمريكية للمحاسبين. فكان سؤالي للأخ اللي جاء على التجربة يعني متباهية فقلت له يعني وين السولفنسي حقت بلدك؟ سيادة بلدك لما تغير تنظيم داخلي بناء على شيء خارجي. فما كان الجواب صراحة لما مثل السيشن قال اسمه كويشن سؤالي. السؤال الإنجليزي يعني my question is regarding when a nation changes a local jurisdiction or law based just to comply with efforts. Now efforts have to be implemented without change. The problem is when there's contradictions or conflict between internal laws and efforts. South Korea went through this issue and they had to change the tax law. And I asked the representative of the AAA 2012-2011 meeting in Denver about the solvency of his government, and he didn't have an answer for me. So all he did is that he said it's a good question. So the question can be asked, but can be answered by anybody.
Well, it's a good question, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I think you are very right. One of the obstacles for accepting the international account standards, what we call the national pride. And the national pride, each country, and one of the examples is Japan, United States, and India, and others. They are not saying the IFRS is not good. No, they are saying we are the people, we are the nationals, we should have our own standards. Exactly like us in Saudi, we have also the national pride. And also we have more than the national pride. We have the Sharia bride, actually. That's why we are going to have our standards based on Sharia. Not we are changing, no, we are making more disclosures. So we are expecting more disclosures for certain items. We are not changing measurement, we are not changing any things like related to things that IFRS will not accept it, or the International Account Standard Board will not permit. But we are adding more disclosure, and which is permitted by the IAS. So I think I agree with you. Can we change our laws? Yeah, we can change our laws if it's contradict with good things that IFRS will bring to us, and laws made by humans, and we can change, and standards made by humans. But when it comes for Sharia, no. Sharia, it's a must follow.
The tagline actually is that any law can be changed if it is not contradicting Sharia. Yeah. Any other question, please?
Yes, there's a question from Asif there, and then we'll come back to you. Sorry. Yeah.
Asif from SOCPA. Initially, first an observation or comment that technically it's not convergence, it's a transition from local standards to IFRS, because ultimately it will be IFRS as adopted in Saudi Arabia. So there will be no local standards post 2017, so it will be a transition. Second question is, I would like to throw this question towards my friends from audit firms, and maybe Gavin can take this question. What do you think about the self-review threat if audit clients are ask the auditor to review, to provide convergence advice? Don't you think it will be a self-review threat on a serious independence issue?
This doesn't work. Very good question. I guess if you know the rules under the SOCPA, in terms of the additional work that we can provide to clients when we are auditors, that they're very strict in terms of what we can do with the funding. So this is something that we would need to carefully consider. We haven't started that issue yet internally, but there are a lot of other clients, not our clients, that one can provide this advice. But it is no harm in discussing the issue with the client and giving assurance as to whether the plan that they have got in place is likely to achieve the position, because it's still the goal of the audit, as well as the client, to get financial statements under IFRS. So therefore, there are some aspects of that work that would be consistent with the part of the audit process. But one would have to have a careful look at precisely. When you start going into system changes that you're looking at, etc., this is where you'll start running into issues with conflicts of interest.
Okay. I don't know. Yes, can we have another question from there, and then we come back here, please?
وأنا شايف إن أستاذنا حاجة بس السؤال هنا بالعربي والتأمين مش بعد كده. المشكلة الحقيقية تطبيق المعايير المحاسبة الدولية بس أنا شايف إنها هي مشكلة كيف نطبق المعيار، كيف نقيس فعالية، كيف نفصح بشكل بارد. يعني المشكلة ليست مشكلة يعني اكسبريت اوف ستاندرد بقدر ما هي يعني certification progress is how to measure, how to applicable the standards in the actual. and how to do disclosure. النقطة دي محتاجة إلى كيف نهيئ هذه الكفاءات بشكل كويس جدا تقدر تطبق المعيار عشان نقدر نحقق فعلا قفزة بشكل جيد وممكن من حدوث نقلة نوعية في تطبيق معايير المحاسبة الدولية. النقطة معلش برضه في مقال الدكتور أحمد إذا كنا بنتكلم عن فول ستاندرد بنتكلم عن سمرايز ستاندرد النهارده القضية مش قضية إن أنا بطبق سمرايز ولا بطبق فول، إنما القضية لابد أن يكون في توحد دائم حتى الشركات الميدل والشركات السمول بكره بعد إذا حصل نوع من الكومبيتيشن مع الشركات الكبيرة وحصل نوع من الاجتماعي كونسنتريشن اسوسيشن هتصبح شركة كبيرة جدا، فما نقدرش نقول إلا إنه لابد أن يكون مستعد للتعامل مع هذه المعايير بشكل كامل. والنقطة برضه بجد ونركز عليها. يعني انا بشوف مثلا ان ايه الستاندرد، اي ستاندرد سواء ايفرس او ستاندرد في القياس اللي كان بيظهر كده، المعيار explain in 30 or 40 pages. But the focus, التركيز, it must be how I am as an accountant, how to measure an applicable, how to disclosure in income statement or balance sheet. Thank you very much.
Khalid, would you like to answer please?
أعتقد أن النقطة على حول التحدي بتطبيق المعايير هي نقطة نتفق عليها جميعا. لا شك أنه الآن سيكون تحدي كبير للمحاسبين أو لشركات مكاتب المحاسبة والشركات المحاسبية من حيث أنها ما تطبق قوانينهم المالية أو المراجعين في الشركات وإعداد البيئة ككل بيئة العمل أن تنتقل من معايير السعودية اللي احنا معتادين عليها في الفترة الماضية، وبالرغم من أنه كنا نقول أنه معايير الدولية كانت مرجع في حال عدم وجود معايير أو أساس أو توضيح محدد في المعايير المحلية، لكن يبقى عملية الانتقال للنسخة السعودية من المعايير الدولية ستكون عملية تحول نقلة كبيرة، وهذا يتطلب عملية أن يكون الناس عندهم الوعي بالموضوع والاستعداد لهم مثل هذه المحافل لنقل هذه التوعية، وإن شاء الله زي ما قلنا الدورات التدريبية اللي أو الخطط التدريبية وبعض الدورات تعقدها الهيئة وتعقدها المكاتب وحتى بعض الشركات الكبيرة ستلجأ هي لإعداد برامجها التدريبية لهذا الغرض، لأن لا يمكن أن تعتمد على ما يقوم فيه أي مكتب KPMG أو SMN أو دولة خلافه بالصورة العامة، ستحتاج متطلبات محددة تفي بغرضها أو أي شركة يعني حتى لو كانت شركة تدريبية، لأنه حتى اللي تقوم فيه الهيئة قد لا يكون تماما يتلائم معها. وبالتالي النقل هذا لا يفرق ايضا بالمهنيين المزاولين اليوم، حتى زي ما تكلم الدكتور قبل شوي قال الجامعات، وين استعداد الجامعات؟ حضرتك تفضلت قلت انك دكتور، فانا اتوقع في احد الجامعات، طيب وين اعضاء هيئه التدريس في الجامعات عن تغيير التكست بوك واعداد المتطلبات هذه كلها نقله شامله تتطلب جهد من الجميع في جميع الجوانب، ولا شك انها لن تكون يعني عمليه بدون اي عقبات بدون صعوبات، لكن هي ستكون تحدي، واعتقد انه عندنا كوادر وعندنا ناس اللي عندهم مؤهلات ومع شيء من التدريب سيكون عندهم القدره للتعامل معها.
Can you summarize the question in English and then you answer?
The question was effectively about the real challenge is about the ability to adapt and move to IFRS rather than just moving or doing disclosures, etc. So really the people capability and ability around it is the challenge. And in summary, we know all that it is not going to be an easy move. It is a challenging step, and people are getting, they have the talent, the abilities. They need more training and development to ensure that everybody at the companies that are prepared to do the same, as well as the auditors. They have the skills to do it. Not all of them got it at the moment, but I think they have the ability to learn and develop to move toward that, and this is the objective. The other question I think was, which I haven't answered in Arabic yet, was around the SMEs version of the IFRS standard versus the full version, and the decision around the location between the two parties and who do what, and how does this implicate when the entities develop progress and later on probably they become bigger and maybe the SME is not sufficient for that. I think we have to appreciate that at the first stage when they make the decision to go with SMEs, definitely they are not looking for the next 1 year or 2 years. The entity will make their assessment that there is a 5 years, 6 years, or there's something that they will change in 10 years. Where they want to go to IPO or whatsoever. And by that time, then they will have to make the move to the full version of IFRS. But earlier, probably they will find it maybe more effective for them to use SMEs. Now, the question I would ask along with you, will entities even later on, and probably this is going to be under the discussion for certain department can correct me if I'm wrong, is if an entity that is not mandatorily required to apply the full version of IFRS, can this entity choose to do it, rather than being restricted to do the SME version? And if that option is available, if they want to, rather than just exclusive SMEs, which they are allowed to do so, they move to the full version, they are making all the plan they want. And definitely the entity that planned for an IPO in 2020, for example, why they would go to SMEs and then move in a few years' time. They definitely would take that choice. But I hope, sitting here, that they will be given the choice, that if they want, rather than using SMEs to go to the full version, while it's not mandatory to them, that would be available. السؤال الثاني كان حول المعايير الدولية بنسختها الكاملة اللي مطلوبة للشركات المساهمة وشركات الببليك انترست والإسلام العام، ونسخة المعايير الدولية المختصرة أو الخاصة بالشركات المتوسطة والصغيرة SMEs. وهل عملية التطبيق كيف ستكون؟ فأعتقد أن النقطة أن المهم أنه أول شيء بداية القرار بالنسبة للشركات اللي ما راح تكون ملزم تطبيق النسخة الكاملة، سيكون هي ستقيم وضعها وتوجهها احتمال أنها تكون مطالبة بتطبيق المعايير الدولية في مرحلة لاحقة بناء على التأليف والاشتراطات التي ستوضع بذات الوقت وتتخذ قرار على هذا الأساس. بالإضافة إلى أنه أنا أأمل أنه إن شاء الله يكون حتى لما يتخذ القرار أنه نقول والله هذه الشركات الملزم تطبيق المعايير الدولية بنسختها الكاملة، يكون الشركات الثانية لها الخيار بين أنها تتبع النسخة المصغرة بالخاصة بالشركات الوسطى والصغيرة أو أنها تطبق المعايير الدولية بنسختها الكاملة وتكون على استعداد لأي تحولات أو تطورات مستقبلية.
Thank you, Khalil. I think we all understand that there are and there will be a lot of questions on this whole IFRS convergence, and that's why actually this session was held, and there will be a lot of other sessions will be held actually in future. And also SOCPA actually is having a very detailed plan where input from auditing firms, corporates, and even the small companies will be required, along with the regulating bodies, the CAS, etc., and also banks. So thank you very much for the panel.
If you allow me, I would like to just make one comment.
Yeah, please do that.
I think it's important, I mean, we know that there will be always a question coming, and if we are to choose that to answer all the questions now before making any move, and starting this journey will never make a step.
Exactly.
And move forward. So it's a fact that there will be questions coming, there will be challenges, and as we progress with this project, those will be addressed. And the point is how to engage. The people get engaged, they share their comments, they use the SOCPA, they start their own discussion to understand what those challenges and how to deal with it. ملاحظتي فقط انه اعتقد انه هي رحله لا يمكن يتم الإجابة على كل التساؤلات والعقبات اللي ممكن تواجهها مشروع اليوم. هذا المشروع يجب أن نبدأ فيه وننطلق بالخطوة الأولى، وخلال الأيام القادمة والسنتين القادمة الملاحظات وهذه يتم التعامل معها. لا يمكن أن ننظر ونقول نجيب على جميع التساؤلات اليوم عشان نتخذ قرار بالتحول أو بالانتقال. يجب أن القرار الآن نتخذ، يجب العمل لتحقيق هذا الهدف اللي الآن أصبح يعني ينظر معنا أنه هدف استراتيجي للبلد أو للدولة وللمهنة الآن ككل. فمن خلال هذا العمل وهالجهد سنصل للحلول والإجابات في كل هذه التساؤلات. شكرا لكم على الإعطاء.
I think we agree with Khalil, of course, and as mentioned by Dr. Ahmed, that the two-way process has already been started, and SOCPA will be actually getting inputs from the corporates and auditing firm. And actually, this process is just started, and we say that it is full of challenges, of course, but it's full of opportunities as well. And we look forward for the opportunities, okay, beside the challenges, and the benefits beside the hurdles actually we'll be facing. So let's actually make this process together a success story, hopefully, inshallah. And this is just a start. And I again actually thank you. You want to say something?
No, just to be fair, before maybe there's one more question left in the audience here, but some of our sisters are watching this program at the back. We can't see them, but they can see us. I would like to, check if they have any questions for the audience so that we can proceed. Any questions from the sisters in the background?
Any questions there the other side in the woman toilet?
Okay, if not, then can you have a question from here, from the gentleman from Al Maraya, I guess?
First, my name is Mohammed Zubaidi, the Maraya company. I totally agree with you, Mr. Khalil, that it's too early to talk about what we're going to do with the terms of the convergence on the adoption of the IFRS in Saudi Arabia. However, it's very, very vital and important for all the interested parties or stakeholders to review the progress and be in line with SOCPA in terms of what the progress toward the full adoption of IFRS. My question actually to SOCPA presented by Dr. Ahmed in terms of from where we can review what's the best source of information for us as a company to review the progress and share our idea, our knowledge with SOCPA. I have seen your presentation and actually I feel optimistic and that's efforts made and it's very appreciated, to be honest. However, maybe if I did not attend this event, maybe I will not be able to see this progress. So we need actually to know from where that we can be in line with SOCPA to understand the progress actually. Can I just translate to Arabic? السؤال كان في البداية أنا أتفق يعني كان الاتفاق مع الأستاذ خليل بخصوص إنه من المبكر إنه نتكلم عنه من عملية التحول لأنه راح تجي تشالنج وتحديات في المستقبل، لكن سؤالي كان إنه إحنا بحاجة كشركات مهتمة في عملية التحول بحاجة نحصل على معلومات من مصادر موثوقة عن البروجرس في عملية التحول هذا.
اوكي. بالنسبة لمصادر المعلومة هو عن طريق الاتصال بالهيئة، عن طريق الويب سايت أو الاتصال الهاتفي. في الويب سايت فيه يعني أيقونة كاملة عن مشروع التحول، وأيضا إيميل خاص للستاندرز نفسه، إيميل خاص مو أنفو وإنما إيميل standards@socpa.org.sa. هذا بالنسبة لكيف تحصل على المعلومة. الآن موجود published على الموقع المرحلة الأولى، وسيتم نشر المرحلة الثانية بعد الانتهاء من الطاولة المستديرة وعرض نتائج الطاولة المستديرة على اللجنة. يعني نتوقع خلال شهرين من الآن أو شهر ونصف من الآن سنعرض المرحلة الثانية. المرحلة الأولى سيتم رفعها لمجلس الإدارة خلال أسبوعين من الآن أو 3 أسابيع، وسننظر في قضية التحول الاختياري، عملية small medium size، كل الأمور هذه سيتم يعني إقرارها من قبل المجلس. When it comes for information how we get accurate or reliable information about the project, as I said, we can use the website. There is a special email also for the project itself, and there is also we published all materials related to the first stage of the transition, and next maybe in 2 months or 1 month and a half we'll have to publish the second stage, and will be open for for comments from everybody. It's not closed. The comments can be open. It's open and can be sent to us through emails, fax, visits, live visit I call it, and telephone. All this is open. Regarding how people are participating with us, really we are not happy with the participation level that we have from the practitioners or from the users. There are few people just have participated with us regarding their remarks about the project itself. Hopefully this is because of they are not knowing, or they don't know about the project itself, maybe. And this is one reason. The other reason, maybe they said, okay, let's wait until 2017 and we will think about it, and which is, I think, is a problem. It's a big mistake.
I think that through these kind of sessions, SOCPA actually has given their overall plan in very detail, as we have seen in your. A lot of actually people have now understood the project, and actually, if possible, you can actually keep the version of this presentation also in Perform project on the website, where everyone can see. And as mentioned by one of our attendants, that we can actually provide a kind of timeline and regularly update on on the website so everyone is aware of the progress where we are actually as of now and what are the next steps to be taken, and inputs required by which stakeholders. And any other questions?
Well, I think in the interest of time, I think we should pause the questions. I think this is going to be a never-ending story. And trust me, this is just the one of the many events we're going to have ongoing on this topic. So thank you, the panelists. A great job, I think, and thank you for the audience. Just on behalf of ACCA, we just don't want to thank the audience, the panelists just straight away. We have a small gift of token to everybody. And Dr. Magames, if you can do the honors for us, please. Can we have Sami? Can we present a token of gift to panelists here? The first token of appreciation to be given to Khalil. We have another token of gift for Casey Blach. Sorry, we just got some. We have Gavin. The next one for Suhail Nini. And can we have one for Farhan, who has done a great job for moderating these tough questions? And finally, for the man who made it happen, it's Dr. Ahmed Magames. I would like to present this token myself. Jahanzeb, I think he's left. Maybe he can collect his token in the back with us. And thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.